Well, Cam, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah. So I got a little bit familiar with you when I was actually, I think, talking to Johnny Catalano. He had his film festival recently this year, which I actually, in hindsight, believe I may have seen you at.
Yeah,
Um,
I was there supporting Johnny and supporting a good film friend of mine, Marcus Cook, who was honored that night as a trailblazer.
oh yeah, I do remember that. Which was he there for a film, or was it just the award? I forget.
He was there just for the award, but he's played movies at the festival before. Last year, I showcased my movie Blackwoods, and he was the DP on it.
Mm,
I think he was DP on maybe three films that year. Two other filmmakers had him on as their DP. So he does a lot of DPing for the Cincinnati area,
oh,
and
okay,
he was
gotcha.
there to kind of receive that award for being a trailblazer here for that.
Yeah, that film festival actually was really nice. It's a fairly new festival, made by Johnny, but I was very impressed with the production, and I'm glad that actually people are showing up for it.
No, yeah, it's a great night for film in Cincinnati because, it's one day, so you don't have to block out a whole weekend, but, it gives artists an opportunity to share their work with a live crowd and get live reaction. And I feel like there's not enough opportunities for that in Cincinnati because, it's one thing to, put a clip on social media, put it on YouTube. It's entirely different to have it in a theater and see people laughing or crying or reacting to your movie as it plays real time.
It is. I mean, going to the actual film festival where your film is playing at, it's very different from like an online festival.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I love that Johnny had started that, and that it's something I look forward to every year, honestly.
It is kind of like a reunion in some regards because a lot of the local filmmakers they actually know each other. It's a
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's a small community. I mean, it's small relatively speaking, but it is everyone likes each other for the most part, as far as I can tell.
Well, yeah, and to that point, I mean, I follow people like Joseph Cox and Evan Maines online, and I see them posting about their films, and so to be able to come to a festival like that and watch their films is also really cool. And so, and I would hope they feel the same way about my stuff. You get to share it out there with the socials, but it's nice to have it played back in front of other filmmakers who look at it differently than just somebody who may be a friend of yours on social media.
That's true. That's true. Well, go ahead and just take a second to introduce yourself, how you got started in filmmaking, and then at what point, how Here and See Productions, your company, actually came about.
Yeah. So I got started in filmmaking while I was in school at Ball State University, studying media. Thought I wasn't going to broadcast, and getting to like my senior year, I decided that I didn't want to go into news because it felt like just the news industry as a whole was changing and I didn't like the direction it was going in. And actually, what I really wanted to do was be a filmmaker. And so
Hmm.
after finishing at Ball State, I moved to Chicago and just like dove into the film community there. Spent 2 years just like learning as much as I possibly could about filmmaking. Then spent a year out in LA doing the same thing before I feel like coming back to the Midwest to start my own company is what I really wanted to do. I didn't want to just be an editor or be a PA in LA. I wanted to be a director and own my own content and my own stuff. And so
Yeah.
I moved to Cincinnati in 2015, started my production company in 2018, 3 years later. And from there, originally we started out just doing wedding stuff. We started doing videos for churches. We started doing content for nonprofits, documentary stuff, just whatever I could do to, get my company name out there, pay off the equipment that I was buying and renting and all those things. And then I really decided, all right, I'm going to go for it in 2020. I made my first short film called Holy Zombie, and that like changed everything for me. That film blew up. I mean, we won like 22 awards and 15 different festivals around the world.
Oh
And it
wow.
just like kind of cemented that, like, okay, I can really do this. I got to create a voice that's unique for myself. And then I turned that money into a feature film and then just kind of been trying to grow my film footprint since then and continue trying to make movies, whether it's feature films or short films or working on friends films every year.
Okay. Has your because you've been your company's been around for well, what is it? What is the year? I don't even know what the year is anymore. I'm getting to that point in my life.
7
um,
years.
7 years, yeah. How has your income? Describe to me your income model in terms of how it's grown and changed as you've started drifting toward narrative work being included in terms of your productions.
Well, I mean, to be frank, we definitely are operating out of the red. I mean, we get grants, we get supplementary income from other jobs outside of films, and then we hire our cast and crew in production, and we try to film as efficiently as possible. But
Hmm.
then getting that ROI back on a movie, like if you spend I think my last feature film, we spent around 40 grand on it, but we only made probably about 25 back from it. And, these are real small potatoes. That was our first feature. And so now we're trying to scale to a larger size where you're talking like hundreds of thousands, potentially $1 million film where you're trying to make kind of like that Honor route where you're trying to make 5, 6, 7, 10, 20, 30 million off of it. And
Hmm.
that's the goal, I feel like, for every filmmaker is you make something small, affordable that you can produce that doesn't kill you, doesn't kill your family if you don't see the money back from it, but it gets your name out there, it gets your company out there, you're able to get into festivals, you're able to do showcases, and then hopefully you meet the right people that believe in your scripts, that believe in your style of filmmaking, that will invest in a bigger project, put a name behind it as far as like an actor or actress that's really would allow you to sell it to a more mainstream streaming service or get a theater deal. And so that's where I feel like we're at. We're at this gap of like, we're not quite a starter company anymore, but we haven't launched into the rarefied air of a well known nationwide production company that's putting movies out every year. And so that's where we're working towards.
Okay. What? Because I've read a couple of books in terms of film distribution and sales and things like that, just to learn a little bit more about the business. And so that's kind of where I'm coming at with you with that question particularly. And
Absolutely.
my
Yeah.
observation was actually that micro budgets are very hard to make your money back because there's a threshold of money that you just have to spend in order to get into that next bracket that is actually more guaranteed in some regards to actually make not just make your money back but also make a profit. Has that also been your experience in terms of what you've observed?
Yeah, I would agree. I think micro budget filmmaking is very hard because a lot of people need the money that they have. And so that's what I mean. Like, it's almost like you have to be able to set aside money that, like, I'm okay with setting this money on fire. Like, if I lose this money and I don't make it back, my life will not collapse. I will not lose my house. I will not lose my car, whatever you find valuable, because that's essentially what you're doing. You're creating an art piece that is essentially probably going to fail to make his money back, but in the right hands with the right producer, it could open the right doors for you to make essentially way more money with bigger budgets. But
Hmm.
the odds of getting into that room without a piece of micro budget filmmaking that you've made is very hard. Like, for instance, I just entered into this Tyler Perry contest where it's a short film script writing contest, and they're only accepting a certain amount of entries. And one of the barriers to get into this contest is you have to have a short film written, but you also have to have had produced and directed a feature film,
Hmm.
not a short film. You have to have at least one feature film on your resume that is streaming, and you can't have two feature films. So they specifically wanted somebody who has accomplished one film but has not made 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 films.
That's a
And
very specific thing they're going for then. I didn't
they're
know that.
going for that director like me who has proven he can direct a budgeted film, but has not been able to break through to make X amount of films on his own. And so that
Mm.
them working with me will elevate potentially whatever projects I want to make in the future. And so, I was talking to some of my friends and they're like, I want to enter this contest, but like, I haven't made a feature film yet. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the earning your stripes in the film industry is being able to go from a short project and leading a cast and a crew and a budget from start to finish on a feature. And you're right, it is very hard to make your money back. But I think that's what the industry looks for when they want to invest in people, is to see that you can possibly do a feature film.
Were there anything that you noticed about at least maybe your last feature film, Blackwoods, that
Mhm.
you learned from that you think you'll be able to tweak with the next production that you would like to do or are going to try to do to get you to that next level of filmmaking where you can start making a return on your profits for a larger budget?
Yeah, I would say I'm still in the process of that. I think Freaky Profiling, when we finished that, I mean, we had a lot of suitors and people that were really interested in that film, especially the time that it was coming out in with everything that had just happened with George Floyd, Black
Mm.
Lives Matter movement. And this was a movie around racial reconciliation that was both a comedy and both really heartfelt. And we actually won Best Comedy and Best Black Culture Film at the Cannes World Film Festival. And it was just
Hmm.
like this moment that of like people were excited about this. But then I immediately went into my next feature to ride that momentum. And Blackwoods was that project. And I feel like Blackwoods has been much more of a slow process of me trying to kind of market it in a way that feels organic. It's centered around mental health. It's centered around friendship and men, but it's not necessarily marketable the same way a racial film would be. It's not necessarily. It doesn't have a big name attached to it. So like,
It was a
let's
very
say
hot
there are
topic
five.
at the time.
Yeah, well, let's say right now, Blackwoods, they're five friends meeting in the woods, but those five friends were like, famous actors. Then you're like, you could sell it of like, oh, look at all these people in this movie.
Hmm.
Look at Michael B. Jordan meeting up with Jonathan Majors, meeting up with, Idris Elba. Like, those that would sell itself. But without those names, and it kind of just feels like, uh, an art piece, and art pieces are harder to sell if they're not necessarily like acclaimed with good awards. And so I feel like that's kind of what we're struggling with right now. It's like, all
Hmm.
right, how do we get some momentum behind this and get it onto a platform and get the viewership to get there? And I think that right now I've just been patient with it, but I'm hoping to be able to release it within the next month and really start putting some BTS out, some interviews out around it, and partner with some churches or some mental health organizations to just explain why a movie like this is important.
Yeah. When you were making freaky profiling, you wrote that, correct?
I did, yeah. I write and direct all my movies.
Okay, all right. Um, how did you decide um, to approach that particular topic, and when to? How did you define your boundaries and to know like how you want to approach dancing across the line, very sensitively, but also very purposefully when it came to that type of topic for a film?
No, that's a great question. I think for me, I trust my instincts a lot. I think, my mom, she it was a black activist, a civil rights activist in the state of
Mm.
Mississippi. My grandfather, who is also black, was the first black police chief in the state of Mississippi. I myself grew up in Chicago, where my dad worked for the mayor of the city,
Mm.
and so I had this like kind of gauntlet of just people in my life that I've learned from, and then mentors who have spent time just building out what racial reconciliation looks like in Cincinnati and beyond through a company like Undivided. And they were one of the first people I reached out to with this idea to say, like, hey, I kind of have this idea about this, black activists and this white police officer switching places and them learning empathy from each other. And like we go on this adventure together, kind of like a buddy cop movie, but it's like reverse, and like it's fun, it's serious, but it's also got like heartfelt moments and some like real conversations in it. And they're like, yeah, we love to see, if you finish the script, we love to read it and love to see like if we can invest in it. And so that's what I did. I started writing the script, and then I shared it with them first. They loved it. They kind of affirmed my line of thinking that this is the exact style content that we should be putting out, and that is kind of fair to both sides. Is like it may offend people on one side, but we're also going to offend people on the other side, and we're also going to try to bring them together through
Mutual
that
misery.
laughter. Exactly, exactly. Find common ground through laughter and poking fun at each other. And so once I feel like that they were invested and they're people who do this professionally, and I felt good personally putting my name on this, then that was kind of like, all right, let's go after this, let's shoot this, let's produce this. And I mean, since sharing it, I've seen both. I've seen, people love it. I've seen people tell me, I've seen police officers come up and tell me how impactful it's been. Their families come up and tell me how impactful it's been. Activists come up and say similar things. But I've also seen people online who tore it apart and gave terrible reviews and did not like it, did not think it was helpful at all, and thought that it
Hmm.
was almost like a satire, and that I should be ashamed for writing it, and my film school should be ashamed for graduating me. So,
You're like, yo, I've got
it's
the
hard to
heritage for
differ.
this. I can say these things.
Well, and that's the thing I take from it is like my art is not who I am as a person. My art is my art. It is something that I believe in and I'm passionate about, and
Hmm.
it's a story that I want to tell. And I don't take my personal kind of worth from reviews. Like if someone loves it, I'm glad they connected with it. If they hate it, I'm glad they watched it, because every watch, helps grow the platform, helps
Yeah.
grow my audience. And so that's always what I'm going for, is people that are willing to watch it and share it and talk about my work.
Right. I know. Well, with your last two films, they very much lend themselves to being very message based, and that seems to be kind of your style of storytelling. But are
Yeah,
there other types of movies that you also gravitate towards and that you'd like to make?
that's a good question. I think this company here in C, at its heart, is a faith-based company.
Mm.
I don't like to say faith-based films because that has its own kind of rhetoric behind it
And
that feels
connotations.
more,
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, it feels more like politically right than my films typically are. And so, what I try to say is that all my films have a message because I want there to be a message behind them. But the way that I approach those messages are different. So, like Holy Zombie, it's like a movie about relationships, and it's a comedy, and it's a satire, it's intimacy, but it's also got zombies in it. And so like it's funny, it's quirky, but like we're talking about real relationships and real relationship dynamics. And I've shared that with, youth groups across the country, relationship groups. And then, you got Freaky Profiling, which is essentially another comedy. It's a switch movie, but we're talking about really heavy things like race and racial reconciliation. And so there's movies that don't have as strong a message, and I struggle with figuring out how to, produce them and like market them. But
Hmm.
like I definitely have scripts that I've written that are just like rom-coms, that are just like good popcorn movie, that's just good fun, or good thrillers. This next movie I'm working on, I'm really excited about. It's a short film that I really feel like could continue to show my variety in my writing and directing style. And that one's a little bit more of a drama base than like the other three that I've produced and wrote. So I'm hoping that I can create that so I can share that with audiences and show them that I do have more than just, heavy material that can be great for conversation, but, not always as rewatchable, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Do you sometimes worried about, even though your interest does lie in films that have a message with it, but end up being pigeonholed into those types of films?
No, because I would say my favorite filmmakers are Jordan Peele and Spike Lee.
Mm.
I think that when you think of a Jordan Peele film, you know that it's going to be in the horror genre, but you know that it's going to have a deeper meaning. Like if you think about Get Out and Us and Nope, and he's got this new movie Him coming out, like they all have these underlying tones of like warnings or messages that he wants you to look at beyond just the actual good artwork that is happening within the horror genre. And same for Spike Lee with like Do the Right Thing and Black Klansman, and some of his other movies are always really just painting, black people and black families and black culture in a really creative way, but a way that is challenging to watch and view and causes questions. And I love that about his work. So I feel like if I'm pouring everything I have, resources, time, effort, creativity, and myself into my work, that I would hope that I would build a platform and an audience of viewers that know when I present something that I have something to say with what I'm creating, that
Mm.
is not empty calories. It's a movie that's going to cause them to think and cause them to wonder why I'm telling the story that way. So that's what I hope I attract more so than feel pigeonholed. That's really what I'm known for.
Okay. Well, you said you moved to Cincinnati. Where'd you come from, and why'd you choose Cincinnati?
So that's a long story, but the short version is grew up in Chicago, then family moved to Indiana, and then I went to Ball State. So after graduating, I went back to Chicago, then moved to LA because everyone's like, you got to go to LA to be a filmmaker. But LA just wasn't for me. It felt like in LA, um, you really had to choose your lane. And by that, I mean, like here in the Midwest, we value versatility. So being like a writer, a director, an editor, a cinematographer is great to do everything, to be a one man person that knows the industry in and out. But out there, if you tell them you do more than one thing, they look at you like you're inexperienced or that
Right.
you are naive. Like, well, you can't be a great cinematographer and a director. You can only choose one, so pick one. And I wasn't ready to be that person. I wanted to be someone that was a filmmaker, and whatever aspect of film that means, that's what I want to work on. And so I felt like moving back to the Midwest was the best thing to kind of allow myself to grow organically as opposed to just attaching myself to other people's work. And so originally I was going to live in Indiana. Excuse me. Originally I was going to live in Indianapolis, but I just didn't find the film scene there to really speak to me the way Cincinnati did. And then I came and visited, loved, the art culture, the murals around. And then I just saw how many production companies were here. And so I chose to move here. And that was one of the best decisions I made.
Yeah, well, Cincinnati has really grown over the last like 15 years. And like the
Yeah,
city has cleaned up a lot more. It's gotten a lot, I don't want to just say better, but it kind of has visually more of an identity now, and it seems to be leaning toward that art scene, honestly. And I want, because there's also Nashville that's grown, and then obviously Atlanta, but now we
yeah,
also have Columbus and Cleveland. And so the thing that I noticed a couple of years ago is that there's sort of this new chain of art cities that are popping up, going north to south from all the way Atlanta to Cleveland, because now we have big films that are coming here because of the tax credits, as well as
absolutely.
Atlanta, which is, an amazing thing. I'm glad that happened. But, got Superman that recently just filmed in Cleveland, and we've had Avengers kind of also filmed here. And I don't know. I don't know if Hollywood is honestly going to die per se, but there's a new there's a new champion in town there. He's trying to go for the title,
Yeah, I was just saying that like the tax and credits incentives in Ohio are challenging because most states have like one city that dominates, whether it's like you're in Indianapolis, that's Indiana, Chicago runs Illinois,
Hmm.
Detroit runs Michigan, but like Ohio, you really have three different cities that you could choose from as far as like Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Columbus. And so I feel like that hurts Cincinnati a little bit because like if Cincinnati wasn't Kentucky, like a lot of people say, and Kentucky incentives were the same for Cincinnati, I think they would get more films. But because
Because we're right on the border,
you're right on the border, so for Ohio tax incentives, the fact that you can choose Cleveland, and I feel like a lot of film producers do choose Cleveland, and that leaves Cincinnati out a lot of times. And so I think that we really had a great opportunity to land Sundance, being into the final
Hmm.
top three cities, and the fact that we didn't get Sundance, I think, um, is really disappointing because I think a lot of
Yeah.
producers would have started to have a rhythm of coming to Cincinnati, which then, as they start to think about where they want to shoot their next movie, then they're already familiar with the city. So I think that would have brought more movies just by proximity if we would have got it.
Yeah. Is there anything that you think Cincinnati, other than like, anything money related?
Yeah.
And I phrase this question more from a social standpoint. Is there anything about the film scene in Cincinnati, but also, going towards more Dayton and Columbus area, that chain that runs
Mhm.
right up, 75, that you think needs to change or adapt to in order to grow and become a little bit more, um, a little bit more known in that way?
Yeah, I think I was just talking to a good friend of mine, Chase Crawford, about this, who's a well-known producer out of Cincinnati. And I think the biggest thing is like filmmakers need to one be more welcoming to people from outside of the region. I
Mm.
think there's a lot of like trying to hold on to what is ours because it's so hard to carve out space in this creative lane. So when you do, it's not always comfortable trying to see other people from different cities come in and make films. But I just recently worked with a London produced project for the FIFA World Cup last week. And it was great to just have them in the city, show them around, and show them what our film culture was like. And now they're potentially coming back to do more projects in the future and maybe even want to do a TV show here in Cincinnati. And so it's just like being able to recognize that, like, when you show off your city to the outsiders, you're not giving away space to them, you're creating room for them at the table. So then they can advocate for your region to bring more projects. And then on the flip side of that, I think people who are here need to do a better job of sending their content outside of Cincinnati. So, like, we're very good at hosting um, screenings and theater events for films made in Cincinnati for Cincinnati audiences. Festivals that are local to Cincinnati are doing really well. But if all of our films that are produced and made here are only screened here, then that's not going to show the rest of the creative world what is happening here. And so be intentional about putting your work into Chicago festivals, New York festivals, LA festivals, Atlanta festivals. Like you said, there's so many other creative cities.
Hmm.
And when you start to win awards in those other cities and you can highlight that you shot it in Cincinnati, you shot it in Ohio, you shot it in Columbus or Dayton, then people will start to notice that, okay, something is happening in Ohio and we need to be more invested in what's going on there. And I feel like that's what's kind of missing right now.
Well, that also kind of speaks to some of the negative things that, sometimes we need to assess, and what personal red flags that we might have within ourselves that we might want to consider, either getting rid of or just changing. Because that was also kind of my next question: is there, like, are there any red flags or negative things about the local scene that you think should be removed or changed, within the actual community?
Yeah, I think what is great about our community is that everyone wants to see people succeed and everyone wants to see people do well. I think I wish there was more grant opportunities so I didn't feel like we were fighting for the same money every year. I think that kind of
Yeah.
creates a little bit of a tumble down effect when you're competing with your friend and they're competing with their friend over who's going to have the better idea and the better grant proposal. But in essence, I feel like that happens regardless everywhere for all artists. I think the main thing is just continuing to um, help promote each other's work. I think, if we are all championing what's happening here in Cincinnati, if you see a good film, share that film. If you see someone is having a screening, buy tickets, share it with your platform and tell people to buy tickets. If you see someone has a film drop on Tubi or Amazon or whatever platform, YouTube, go watch it because it's hard to get people to continue come back and support your work. And so I think the more we show up and support the other filmmakers' work and they do the same, then hopefully that'll continue to grow for everybody as artists here.
Hmm. I want to pivot now to your personal style and sense of creativity, and your projects and things like that. What for you personally? What makes an idea worth committing to and pursuing?
Well, I think for me, I always start with two questions. The first question is, what does this say about God and my faith in Jesus?
Mm.
Because that is always a big one for me, especially in storytelling. I feel like the Bible is the greatest story ever written. And if you read it, it really is life changing. And so, how do you take some of those themes and some of those parables and put them into content and you show mercy, you show grace, you show forgiveness, you show empathy. And then the second thing is, what does this say about Black people or people of color? I think a lot of times I hear people, growing up in Chicago, there's a real big, like, just kind of narrative about the city of Chicago that is really negative. And with, like, the themes around Chirac and guns and violence, but there's a whole nother side of Chicago that is very much family focused and like Midwest roots and like Black excellence. And then, moving to a place like Indiana where the KKK started, a lot of people there who are my friends had never met successful Black families. And so, me being a Black male who lived in a really nice house and went to a nice school, like, that was foreign for them to see.
Mm.
And both my parents being college educated, that wasn't something that they were used to seeing, but that's a norm in my life. And so, like, I try to tell stories where we're not necessarily just blasting like Black culture, but like we're elevating it and showcasing it in a way that, like, you may be unfamiliar with if you don't have this experience. And so I try to write dynamic characters and characters that tell a full story, either within their faith or within their heritage and their culture.
Mm. What would you say is particularly unique, coming from your own perspective, about Black culture compared to other ethnic cultures within the United States, that you
I
ideally
think
pursue, that gives you that fuel for wanting to share it through your creativity?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that, because of our history and with through slavery, we don't have that connection back to the homeland. So if you talk about people who are from Mexico, like, they go to Mexico, they cross the border, they have family waiting for them, they have that immediate heritage tapped into. Same with Puerto Rican, Dominican. You talk about people who are Irish heritage. You talk about Italians, like, they go home, they go across the pond, they go to Europe, they know exactly, they can trace back their lineage to where they started, in what village, what town, like the type of food you eat. And so, like, it's very
Mm.
much like, most ethnic groups in America have this sense of history and where they come from, but being Black, African American, that's all erased. It's just gone. Like, you can do a 23andMe and figure out that 70% of you is from Ghana, and you can go to Ghana, but, like, it's not the same because you don't have the relatives, you don't have
Mm.
the heritage with the food and with the scene and with the music and the beliefs that they have. And so, Black culture really is like, we are descendants from people who were cut off from their roots and started their own roots here in America, that are driven based off of, years of oppression, overcoming that oppression, fighting for this country, dying for this country, helping build this country, and then building neighborhoods and building communities that have both good and bad. And you showcase all of that in your art, from hip hop to fashion to food to, like, just being um, people of color that live it out day to day in your life. I feel like that's what makes, like, Black culture so exciting and so, like, entertaining when you think about, like, putting that into a movie, because it's very unique to most cultures around the world.
Mm.
Because, again, we really kind of are telling our history just from the last, like, 400 years. We're not going all the way back to the beginning times and all the way back to Africa. We really are a group of people that, survived a lot, but have a lot to tell in our stories.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's because I'm obviously, pale as a ghost, and so it's I like to hear the different perspectives, because sometimes also when it comes to that 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 reality that does cause a little bit of attention, not attention, tension here in America. I like to hear
Mhm.
the different perspectives, of people who are trying to move society toward a much better place, in the modern day. And creativity is certainly one of those middle grounds that everybody wants to come to, because art is one of those things that provides a sense of beauty and meaning to everybody's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me, when I say, like, black films, like would you consider like Get Out like a black movie, or would you consider Black Panther a black movie, or Us a black movie? Like for me, I think most people would just consider those really great movies
Yeah.
that are produced by good black directors. Same with Sinners that just came out from
I haven't seen
Ryan.
that, but I really want it to. It looks good.
Yeah, it's just like when I feel like there's other content you consider black because it's like they're targeting a specific audience and a specific style of storytelling that is can only be told by black people, and the fact of like the ghetto and the gangster and the all of that type of culture, and that is someone's real lived experience, but I feel like too often that gets pigeonholed as the only black experience. And so
Mm.
that's why I like telling stories that show black leads falling in love, black leads, going into the woods, because a lot of times black people aren't seen as hikers and yoga and doing, all these tranquility things. Like when I showcased my movie for the first time at a screening and people didn't know what it about, like I had people come up to me and be like, I thought like I couldn't enjoy your movie because I was just waiting for like this white person to come and kill them the whole time. And it was like you saw five black people in the woods, and immediately your brain goes, "Oh, they're about to die." And it's like, and
Yeah.
that's the thing with like cinema that like we've seen it happen so often with these tropes that like I try to like flip some of that on his head and be like, "No, we like to hike too. It's okay to be out in the wilderness. There's not someone lurking around the corner to get you."
We know how to swim, all those things, the
Yeah,
classic like
exactly.
stereotypes and jokes and things like that. Um,
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
what would you say is a trope that you think honestly society would be better off not perpetuating when it comes to how it's portrayed on screen?
I haven't given much thought to that, but off the top of my head, I just think the white black man.
Mm.
I can't say it any other way than that. But the fact that if you are black and you golf and you have a 401k, you have a
Mm.
country club access, and you wear a button up, and that you talk in a certain elegant way, then you're fronting or pretending to be white. I think there are black people who that is their lived experience. That is the world they grew up in, and they
Mm.
should be allowed to exist in that form as if that is who they feel is true to them, without being made fun of or told that they're acting white because they talk proper and because they have good financial resources.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I totally veered off from getting more into your art, but like the question popped up, and I'm like, I gotta ask
No,
this guy.
no, I mean that's just the one off the top of my head. I see that one happen a lot in
Hmm.
black content, white content, TV shows, movies that like, oh, you forgot who you was, like, you got all this money, you're not real, or like people, and I see it play out in reality of like especially second generation money kids, like, okay, your dad was in the NBA or your dad was famous and he got money, and so
Hmm.
you grew up in the suburbs, but you want to pretend and act like you're hard because you want to earn your black card, because you don't feel black enough, because you don't have the same struggle that your dad had. Like being black isn't synonymous with struggling. Like you can be
Right.
black and be wealthy. You don't have to be black and prove you're from the hood, because people in the hood want to get out the hood. And I think, when you see stuff like that in movies, it makes people feel like that they have to go out and change who they are to be accepted.
Hmm. What would you say is what was the hardest production hurdle you've had to overcome when it came to making a feature film?
Oh, without a doubt, that was my feature film, Freaky Profiling. Actually had my producer quit
Oh, well, that
halfway
that
through
would
the
that would
project.
definitely qualify.
Yeah, I mean, we worked on this movie probably about 5 6 months, maybe even longer than that. Maybe it was actually probably it was like a year. I wrote the script, and then we started pre-production probably like 9 months out. Took me about 3 months to write the script, and then we started production 9 months. And then, we're working through, and it's a 7 day shoot, I believe. It was probably more like 11 days. We got to like day 4. Um, and we were filming in, was it January or February? I think it was January. And it just so happened in Cincinnati that this ended up, the weather shifted on us like it does in the Midwest, and it dropped to like 11.
Cincinnati is the London of the Midwest.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. It went from like a sunny, like 30-40 degree weather day to like sunny, cloudy, 11-degree weather day. And my producer was just, and it was an all day shoot outside. And up until that point, all of our other scenes have been interior locations. And she just believed that this wasn't safe, that this wasn't a good idea, that we needed to cancel the filming. And we had already rented a like a strap for the car for our camera, a mount for the car to go on, our camera to go in the car. We rented like this rig for someone to be filming in front of the car, behind on a truck. We had all of these exterior locations booked, and I was like, there's no way we're going to get all this gear, all this money, and everybody who's supposed to be on set back for another day, like where we have houses to go into for dinner, for lunch, for like breaks. And like we will tell the entire cast, we'll have hand warmers, we'll have coats on set. When we're not rapping, they'll be in cars. And she just decided that it wasn't worth it. And so she quit. She walked off the movie, and she tried to get, some of the other crew members to quit too. But fortunately, it was her and my script supervisor that quit. Everyone else was like, no, like, we're not going to leave Cameron out to dry. Like, Cam has been working on this project really hard, and, he's paying us, and we believe in this project, and we want to see it through to the end. And we know it's going to be a cold day, but we're just going to grind through it. And so,
Was there
yeah,
anything that you could sense, like, is there anything that preceded this that where you could sense or foresee this type of situation happening? Or was it just like
honestly,
really out of the blue?
it was really out of the blue. She was really adamant that, and so this is what I say. I think Cincinnati has a lot of people that love the idea of filmmaking because it
Mm-hmm.
seems fun. It seems like artsy and cool and like a creative space to be in. And a lot of people, this is not their full-time job. It is their part-time job. It's their passion. It's what they're
Mm-hmm.
excited about. But then you hit a wall where you've been filming for 3 straight days, and you got to shoot outside for one full day, and it's cold and it's going to be challenging. And you
Mm-hmm.
start to see who really wants to be a filmmaker, who really is in this because they see it as something that that they are willing to do extreme things for, that they're willing to work hard for, they're willing to brave cold conditions for, or are they just in it because they think it's fun and it's art, and when it push comes to shove, they don't want to work that hard because they're not getting paid that much, because it's not a great payday, because it's a
Mm-hmm.
indie film in Cincinnati that's not going to be giving you the rate that you could get if it was a bigger project. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really what it came down to, is that you hire people and you want them to care about your project as much as you do, but in the end, very few people do. And the ones that do are the ones that you keep around and keep working with project after project after project.
Yeah, I mean, because it's the scene is small enough and it's not as large, the people who end up others not wanting to work with, other people not wanting to work with those particular people because of whatever problem or strife that they actually yield on or on set or sometimes even offset, which also happens. They don't really stick around, as opposed to where they could just, if they were in a much larger city and they had a marketable skill set where they could get consistent work, those people will keep reappearing over and over again. you know
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely.
hmm when you're working with an inexperienced actor, how do you cultivate a good performance from them?
Yeah, I actually I did a YouTube short on this. If you go to my production page here and see productions on YouTube, you'll see
Mm-hmm.
how to maximize your acting talent. And the main thing I say is rehearsals. Especially if they're inexperienced. What I like to do is get my whole cast together, and we just read through the script. When we meet, depending on how big the project is, we'll meet 2, 3, or 4 times before getting the set, so that they have those reps with people across from them. They have reps with me. They know what I'm looking for out of them. I'm able to spend real quality coaching time with them. That way, when we get on set, I'm more so focused around the lighting, the camera aspects, how our scene is playing out, and the dynamics of the space, and less time focused on the actors, because they, at this point, they should know what I've expected of them. They should know what inflections I want. They should know their motivation. They should know how to feed off the other person, because they've done it 3, 4, 5 times leading up to this
Hmm.
moment. I'll give you a great example. Um, Freaky Profiling, there is this long scene. It was one of the best scenes of the movie, one of the most impactful scenes of the movie, and it's between 3 different characters that all have long monologue, back and forth, arguing dynamics happening, and just given the like opportunity of when we were allowed to get into space to film. Unfortunately, it fell as like our last scene of the day,
Mm.
uh, and we only had this location for like 30 minutes left, and we hadn't even shot one shot for this scene yet. But it
Oof.
was one of the biggest, most impactful scenes of the movie. So I looked at all the 3 actors as we were setting up for the camera and the lights and getting it ready. And I was like, look, you guys, I've done this in rehearsals. Like, you guys are probably each only going to get one take. And so I want you guys to treat this like you're in a theater. The audience is looking at you, and you don't got 3, 4, 5 takes to get this right. You got one take to give me your best on camera, and like, let's see what you can do. And they nailed it. They crushed it. All 3 of them brought their energy, and we got that scene done within 30 minutes. And after that first long take together, I just did a couple pickups of closes on their faces to kind of get a few extra moments of certain lines I wanted. But other than that, their first take was what you see in the movie.
Mm.
But that doesn't happen if we don't rehearse together, and they don't know the timing of when to come in off the other person and be able to play it out 3, 4 times before we get to set.
How important is off-camera chemistry between actors and how it translates to their performance on screen?
I think it depends on the movie. I think with Freaky Profiling, that movie was really driven by the characters being able to mimic each other and to play both a white police officer and a black activist, and
Hmm.
like had to be able to switch as a actor of like, who's in my skin right now. And so they had to work on different just ticks and characteristic movements and hand placements and stuff that
And
was
like
like,
mannerisms and all those things.
and mannerisms that were unique for the visual of the audience to be able to see the difference. And so they poured a lot of time, even beyond what I, scheduled for them. Like, they caught, like, one lived in Columbus, one lives in Cincinnati. They scheduled their own Zoom conversations just to build that chemistry with each other, just to run lines together, just to understand, like, how would you stand this way? How would you enter a room this way? Like, all those different things they put into place that really showed up in the movie. But then, in Holy Zombie, my romantic comedy, the lead actor and lead actress never met each other until they were on set. And
Mm.
together, they both got nominated for Best Actor and Actress in the festival we entered into. And so, like, they hit it off great, and their chemistry was great on camera. But they maybe said 4 words to each other out off camera. So, like, they didn't need it. They only needed to be in the moment when the cameras were on. And so, I think it really depends on the actors. It depends on the script, and it depends on just how invested you need your actors to be with each other.
Okay. What was the hardest skill that you had to learn in order to competently direct a project?
Hmm. I think trusting other people. I think that
Mm.
is, when I think of skills as a director, I think of, okay, of course, the technical skills of creating a shot list, of communicating what you want from the script, being able to block out a scene and know where actors should enter and exit, and placing your lighting. All of those things are part of it, but really what it comes down to is you can't do everything on set. You're limited in time, so you have to hire people you trust, people a director of photography you trust, because unless you are the DP, they're going to be setting up a lot of your lighting and a lot of your visuals that is going to really define what your movie looks like. So being able to let that go and understand that, like, hey, I trust that what you guys are doing here is good. And if you need my input, let's talk about it. And then same with the actors, like, because at some point you have to let the actors run with the script and make it their own as well. You can't micromanage them. You can't force lines out of them. You got to allow them to act, and you got to hire the right actors. So like, so that when you get on set again and you are rolling, you're able to trust the performances they're putting out there. So I think the hardest part for me as a director is definitely letting go and trusting that the people I hired, they are talented and professional, and they're great at what they do too, the same way I am. So this is a collective. You realize you're less of the Michael Jordan and LeBron James style of
Mm-hmm.
greatness, and you're more of the Phil Jackson coaching greatness. Like, you are the coach on set that makes sure everybody is playing their role correctly. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of directors like to be the one with the ball in their hand, taking all the shots, because that's what you think directing is, but it's really the one that's calling the plays for everyone else to take the shots.
I can definitely relate to the trusting part for sure, because especially if you care a lot about the project, you want in your hands, in everything as you can. That way you feel like you're putting your touch on everything. That way it comes out the way you had it in your head onto the screen for the rest of the audience. Um, Personally for
Yeah,
me, it's
and I
like it
think on
comes to like,
smaller projects you can do that. I think the smaller, like, if you can be the DP, the director, sometimes even the actor, like, you can control everything. But like, the bigger that project gets, the less you're able to do that.
yeah, for me when it's my part when it comes to trusting is also the way I write when I write a script. Because when you're writing a dialogue, you're writing dialogue for actors. You also have to keep in mind that if you overwrite a specific line, you will pigeonhole that actor into trying to give a
Mm.
very specific delivery, and that will either work or it'll fall on its face. There's no real in between, because if it doesn't work, you're going to end up trying to like word your way to manipulate the actor to get what you want without having to actually let them just breathe. And so
Absolutely.
when you're writing dialogue, you also got to know that, yeah, this line might be really really basic, but don't underestimate a good actor's ability to turn it into something that they can flesh out on screen.
Yeah, 100%. That or change completely. I've had some of my best lines in the movies be stuff that actors have thought of once they've really have dived deep into a character. So like, I had my lead actress in Freak Profiling one time, like, tell me, like, I don't think my character would respond this way. Like, she would not answer this question that way. She would do it like this. And I was like, I didn't really feel what she was saying at first, but as she continued to talk to me about it and I wrote it down, I was like, you know what? I feel like you're right. And I see you're passionate about this. So let's try it that way. And then when we did, it worked. And I was like, okay, let's just keep it. There's no reason to go back.
There's a big tell of when an actor is giving feedback or maybe suggesting a change, that their level of confidence of when they're suggesting their idea is really telling of how that performance is actually going to turn out. Because if they really believe in what they're saying, that's going to
Mm,
translate directly into their performance.
absolutely. And, I've had other times where people have tried to change things and I had to, veto it because, like you said, it may set up something in the future that they may not be thinking about in the script. And I'm like, no, you have to say it this way, because 30 pages later, this set is said, and it won't make sense 30 pages later if you don't say it exactly this way right here. And so it's just knowing those things as the director and the writer a lot of times, of what is flexible and what is not flexible within your script.
hmm Other than a subpar performance during an audition, what would be another reason you would not want to cast somebody?
Oh, absolutely. Somebody who is unpredictable. Like, if you
Mm.
show up late, if you constantly need to reschedule, if it takes you too long to get back to me, then I'm just done. Like, on my last film, I had a guy that had a really good following, and I actually wrote the lead character for him in mind because I really wanted to work with him. But by the time we got together, I just felt like he didn't prioritize the audition the way I wanted him to, and just like his excuses seemed to be very much aligned
Hmm.
with that he had other projects going on that he was more focused on. So I was like, he's not going to be focused on this. I'd rather work with somebody who's inexperienced but completely devoted to the project, and I know I'm going to get their best effort, and we can coach them up and we can work with them, versus someone who's really talented, but I don't know what version of them I'm going to get. And so that's absolutely like a big thing for me. Like if we are hiring you, and obviously, you know, these characters mean a lot to me because I put a lot of detail into who I put on paper, and I can't get you as the actor to show up motivated or show up for rehearsals or show up for Zoom calls or, you know, get back to me in a timely manner with a read, then I'm not going to trust you on set to be prepared. And that's when I would move on from an actor.
Hmm. To date, what is the project that you're most proud of and why?
It's funny because I struggle to be proud of my projects, and
Oh,
that's
I can relate
more
to
of
that.
my uh, growth of where I'm at now and my perfectionist mindset of constantly trying to improve and get better. And my wife always tells me that like you just be okay with, you know, celebrating something. So I would say if I had to pick one, it would probably be freaky profiling. I think
Yeah.
it's my first feature film, and it's really hard to go from a short film to feature film, and the amount of resources we poured into that, the actors that showed up to be a part of it, the locations that opened doors to facilitate us being able to film there, the financial backing we got from people like that. Is the other projects I was able to do on my own and my own resources and my own finances, and that's a project that I feel like would never have happened without the film community in Cincinnati just being so supportive of the work I was doing.
Hmm. How do you know when a story is finished, or at least the script is finished, enough to be able to actually move to production and be happy with it?
I'm not the right person to ask because I don't care about finishing scripts. To be honest, I mentally dump a script down, and then I go back and I tweak it and I tweak it, and then I share it with people, get their feedback, and maybe I'll tweak it again. But I really don't. Once it's down and I'm like happy with it, it could be like 80% good, 70% good. And I feel like once I get my actors and we cast and we work through it together, then that's when the script starts to be really good. And then at that point, you know, the script becomes the sandbox in which you're building your castle. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, how are we gonna can we actually film this? Like where are we gonna film it? How's it gonna look? And so then I just switch gears completely and just go diving into how it's gonna show up in camera. And then from there I switch gears to all right, how are we gonna make this look good in the edit? So I think the script part is one part of the process, but I don't live and die with that part of the process. That's more of like the exciting part where it's just like you and your story by yourself. But eventually you got to share it with everyone else. So once you start sharing it with people, I feel like that's when I let go of my idea for the script and I really just try to hire a producer, hire a team that cares about the story. And then as a collective, now we're chasing after being able to bring it to life.
Hmm. What makes filmmaking worth the headaches and the heartbreaks?
If you would ask me this like a month ago, I would say, "Get out! It ain't worth it." uh, I I think what makes it worth it is telling a story that you want to share with other people. I mean, everything to me is about stories. Um, whether that's funny stories, horror stories, um, romantic stories. As a kid, I've always loved just sitting in a movie theater and watching a good story. And so for me, what makes filmmaking worth it is anytime you can bring people together to watch your story and create a conversation around it, hear their thoughts around it, laugh with them. And I know people don't go to theaters as much anymore, but I still think the absolute best way to consume a movie is on the big screen. And,
Facts.
my goal is to one day have a movie that is, a worldwide release where we're able to do a press tour and promote the movie. And I'm able to talk about the movie in different cities across the world and hear what different people from different backgrounds relate to the film about. And like that for me is why I'm really into filmmaking and what I'm really aspiring towards. It's just that day, that moment where I have a story that's worth being shared broadly with everybody.
Yeah. I mean, being able to give people that not just an escape for reality for like, an hour and a half or 2 hours, but being able to give them something meaningful that they walk out of the theater of. And that emotional high that you get from either a film's conclusion or particular highlights that happen within the film that they're able to connect with, that's that's a special thing that not a lot of people can do. And I think as artists, we're all just looking for that one outlet to be able to connect with people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's well said. I would agree with that.
Yeah. Well, Cam, it's been great getting to know you. Thanks for coming on. I enjoyed talking with you. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I would say to anybody that is aspiring to be a filmmaker, just start creating. I would say, don't worry about making the absolute best thing right off the bat because 3 years from now, you're going to hate it and you're going to want to make something better.
Yeah.
And that is the curse of a filmmaker. But if you don't start, you'll never get going. And so I would say my biggest mistake as a filmmaker early on was when I wrote a script in 2016 and I thought that like this was the big one and this was
Mm,
gonna blow me up, and it flopped. It wasn't good. People didn't like it. I didn't get good responses from it. We did not create a movie off of it. And for like 3 years, I just sat kind of frozen with like imposter syndrome, unwilling to write anything else. And then I finally got the motivation and the inspiration to write Holy Zombie, and that changed everything for me. And I realized, sometimes you write a script and you can't put all of your film future into one script, and you got to be willing to write other stuff and produce other stuff. And once you get started, you'll get a rhythm for what style of filmmaking you like and what you want to create. But I think the biggest thing is like put yourself out there, put your work out there, and share it with people.
that's good stuff, man. Well, thanks for coming on. It was good to get to know you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I didn't know like what type of questions you were going to ask, but you're a really great interviewer, and I enjoyed,
Well, thank you.
going back and forth and talking about it,
Yeah.
talking about film.
Yep.